Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the bustling university square, a sea of notices battled for attention, each attempting to lure students with vibrant hues and enticing offers. Amidst this visual chaos, a seemingly ordinary sheet of white paper emerged as extraordinary, its edges gripped by Lucian Parker, a student poised between curiosity and intrigue. His eyes fixated on the words that promised an unconventional adventure. An adventure unveiled, Gender Odyssey study, rewards and learning await. This provocative study, as explained on the poster, intended to unravel the intricacies of gender identity by inviting participants to embrace life as the opposite gender, thereby fostering a transformative personal journey. As Lucian immersed himself in this revelation, his curiosity evolved into conviction. He was captivated by the idea, quickly snapping a photo of the research team's contact details. This study could be his golden ticket, not just compensation and credits, but a unique research experience to showcase his academic dedication. The application process proved rigorous. Psychological evaluations, interviews, background checks. 2 weeks later, Professor Eleanor Winters, the study's lead researcher, called with news. Congratulations, Mr. Parker. You've been selected for the cross-gender living experiment? Thank you, Professor. This is exactly the opportunity I've been looking for. Lucian shifted in his chair, already calculating how this would look on his applications. Before you commit, I must emphasize the seriousness of this undertaking. For the integrity of our research, participants must adhere strictly to protocols. This isn't casual roleplay. You'll be living as a woman full-time for 12 weeks. I understand completely. I'm prepared to follow all requirements. Very well. Report to Harrington Hall, room 312, Monday at 9. We'll begin your orientation and transformation. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Lucian informed his part-time employers he'd be participating in a research study, arranged for his mail to be forwarded, and cleared his social calendar. Sunday night, he stared at his reflection. Angular jawline, broad shoulders under a navy blue t-shirt, short blonde hair styled with minimal effort. By this time, tomorrow, that person would be gone. Monday morning arrived with a mix of academic excitement and personal apprehension. Lucian wore simple clothes, jeans and a gray button-down, and carried a duffel with basic necessities. The sociology department occupied the 3rd floor of Harrington Hall, where Professor Winters greeted him at room 312. Welcome to your transition space, she said, ushering him into a room resembling a cross between a salon and a classroom. 3 other participants, all male, waited nervously. Professor Winters introduced the team: stylists, vocal coaches, movement specialists, and research assistants who would document the process. Gentlemen, today marks the beginning of your journey. By the time you leave this room, you'll have new identities, appearances, and social roles to maintain for the coming months. A research assistant handed Lucian a folder. Your new identity documents. You'll be Natalie Porter for the duration of the study. Inside the folder lay a university ID, temporary driver's license, and detailed biography. According to these documents, Natalie was a 24-year-old graduate student in communications. A sheet outlined specific protocols. Maintain feminine speech patterns, vocabulary, and inflection. Practice feminine body language, including sitting with knees together. Wear only provided wardrobe items. Apply makeup daily according to guidelines. Use women's facilities exclusively. Attend weekly check-ins with research team. Journal daily about experiences and reactions. The wardrobe team has assembled appropriate clothing based on your measurements and the requirements of the study, Professor Winters explained, leading Lucian to a rack of clothes. For consistency, each participant receives a standardized collection tailored to their new identity. The rack contained primarily professional attire: charcoal gray skirt suits, white and cream blouses, modest black heels, and several emerald green midi skirts. Everything appeared tasteful, conservative, clothes a serious graduate student might wear. The emphasis is on lived experience, not exaggerated stereotypes, Professor Winters said. You'll dress appropriately for academic and professional settings. The transformation process took hours. First, the hairstylist applied a semi-permanent treatment to soften Lucian's blonde hair and added extensions, creating a feminine bob that framed his face. Next came makeup instruction, foundation to soften his features, subtle eyeshadow, mascara, and rose-tinted lip gloss. Not too much, the makeup artist instructed. Natural and professional is our goal. The wardrobe specialist helped him dress in his first outfit, a charcoal gray pencil skirt that ended just below the knee, a white silk blouse, sheer hosiery, and 2-inch black pumps. A thin gold necklace and small pearl earrings completed the ensemble. When Lucian finally faced the mirror, a stranger looked back. The blonde bob softened his jawline. The makeup subtly feminized his features without appearing theatrical. The professional outfit looked entirely believable. A young woman ready for a day at graduate school. And now, said the voice coach, we begin the real work. Looking the part is just the surface. Living authentically as Natalie requires comprehensive transformation. For 3 days, Lucian remained in the transition space with the other participants, receiving intensive training. They practiced walking in heels, sitting properly, adjusting their voices, applying makeup, and managing their new wardrobes. By Thursday, Professor Winters deemed them ready. Remember, this is immersive research. You'll live in university housing specifically arranged for this study. You'll attend modified class schedules, interact with the campus community, and function entirely as your female identity. Lucian, now officially Natalie, stepped outside Harrington Hall that afternoon feeling simultaneously hypervisible and anonymous. The charcoal gray suit felt constricting in unfamiliar ways. The heels altered his gait and posture. His newly blonde bob tickled his neck when he turned his head. The campus apartment assigned to Natalie was small but comfortable, already stocked with beauty products, additional clothing items, and reference materials. A schedule on the refrigerator detailed classes, research check-ins, and study requirements. That evening, facing the bathroom mirror, Natalie carefully removed her makeup according to the instructions provided, applied moisturizer, and hung up the gray suit and white blouse. The protocol manual specified sleeping attire. Modest pajama sets in cotton or silk. No returning to male clothing or presentation, even in private. 1 day down, she whispered, unaccustomed to the higher pitch of her voice. 83 to go. The first week proved the most challenging. Natalie constantly caught herself sitting with legs sprawled open, walking with too long strides, forgetting to apply lipstick after lunch. Each misstep earned a gentle correction from the research assistant assigned to shadow her. Smaller steps, Natalie. Don't forget to reapply your makeup. Remember to speak from your upper register. Classes presented another hurdle. Though the university had created a special academic schedule for study participants, Natalie still faced unfamiliar peer interactions. Students who had known Lucian now encountered Natalie, unaware of the connection. Professors, informed of the study, maintained the illusion by addressing her correctly and treating her as they would any female graduate student. By week 3, certain aspects became routine. The morning ritual of styling her blonde hair, applying makeup, and selecting appropriate attire grew familiar. Natalie developed preferences within her prescribed wardrobe. The emerald green midi skirt paired with a cream blouse felt most comfortable for daily wear, while the charcoal gray suit with its crisp white blouse became her armor for presentations and important meetings. During her weekly check-in, Professor Winters observed Natalie's progress with approval. "You're adapting remarkably well. Your journal entries show increasing comfort with external markers of femininity. Have you noticed internal shifts as well?" Natalie considered the question. "At first, everything felt like a performance, conscious choices to move or speak differently. Now, some of those behaviors happen without conscious effort. I no longer have to remind myself how to sit or walk in heels." Professor Winters nodded, making notes. "That's consistent with our hypotheses about embodied experience. The body learns patterns that eventually require less conscious control." The fourth week brought an unexpected challenge when Natalie encountered a former classmate at the university library. "Excuse me," the young man said, reaching for the same reference book. "I haven't seen you around before. Are you new to the department?" Natalie froze momentarily, recognizing Michael from her advanced statistics course last semester. "Relatively new," she managed, falling back on her practiced feminine speech patterns. "I'm in communications, actually. Natalie Porter." "Nice to meet you, Natalie. I'm Michael Chen, sociology." He smiled, clearly not recognizing Lucian beneath Natalie's blonde hair and feminine attire. "Maybe we could study together sometime?" The interaction left Natalie shaken, not from fear of discovery, but from the realization that her transformation was completely convincing. She had successfully navigated a conversation with someone who knew Lucian without raising suspicion. By week 6, the halfway point, routine had solidified into comfort. Natalie no longer thought twice about applying makeup each morning or selecting accessories to complement her outfits. The emerald green midi skirts became her favorite, professional enough for academic settings, but with a pleasing movement that made her feel graceful. The swish of fabric around her legs as she walked across campus became a quiet affirmation, as did the rhythmic click of her modest heels on marble floors. During a department reception, Professor Winters observed Natalie chatting comfortably with faculty members, one hand gesturing expressively while the other held a glass of sparkling water. Her blonde hair caught the light as she laughed at a colleague's joke, her body language entirely uncontrived. "Remarkable adaptation," Professor Winters murmured to her research assistant. "Subject 4 shows the most natural integration of feminine social behaviors. Note how she's positioned herself in the conversation circle, slightly angled, maintaining appropriate eye contact, using supportive nods and responses." Later that evening, completing her required journal entry, Natalie reflected on the reception. Day 42. Attended departmental function wearing the charcoal gray suit with the pale blue blouse for variety. Found myself completely comfortable throughout the 3-hour event. Fascinating realization. I no longer mentally narrate my feminine behaviors. Earlier in the study, I would consciously think, cross legs now, or use hands while speaking. Today, these actions happened naturally. Even more interesting, I'm developing preferences within my prescribed identity. I enjoy the subtle power of the gray suit in professional settings, but prefer the green skirts for their comfortable elegance. Is this what the research team means by authentic lived experience? Week 8 brought a significant milestone when Natalie presented research at a graduate symposium. Standing before peers and faculty in her most formal outfit, the charcoal gray suit with a silk scarf at the neck, hair neatly styled, makeup flawless, she delivered her presentation without a single lapse in her feminine persona. The sociological implications of digital community formation extend beyond simple connectivity metrics, she explained, gesturing toward her slides. We must consider how identity performance online creates feedback loops that reshape offline behaviors. The irony of discussing identity performance while herself engaged in a complex identity experiment wasn't lost on Natalie. Yet during the questions that followed, she realized something profound. She wasn't performing anymore. The answers flowed naturally, in her now familiar voice, with gestures and expressions that no longer required conscious effort. Professor Winters approached afterward, eyes bright with academic interest.
Exceptional presentation, Natalie. Your engagement with the material transcended the parameters of our study. You weren't just presenting as a woman. You were presenting as a scholar who happens to be a woman.
Thank you. Natalie adjusted her gold necklace, a habitual gesture she'd developed. It felt natural. That's precisely what makes this research groundbreaking. We're documenting not just external adaptation, but internal integration of gender expression. That night, staring at her reflection as she removed her makeup, Natalie confronted an unsettling question. Was this still a research participation, or had it become something more? The blonde woman in the mirror no longer looked foreign or constructed. The carefully applied makeup, the styled hair, the feminine nightgown hanging on the bathroom door, all felt increasingly authentic. Week 10 arrived with increasing anxiety about the study's approaching conclusion. During her check-in, Natalie raised concerns with Professor Winters. "I've been thinking about the transition back," she said, smoothing her emerald skirt over her knees. "The protocol mentions a decompression period, but doesn't provide specific details." Professor Winters set aside her notebook. "The decompression phase is tailored to individual participants. Some may require minimal adjustment to return to their previous gender expression. Others might need more comprehensive support." "And if someone doesn't want to return?" The question escaped before Natalie could consider its implications. Professor Winters studied her carefully. "That possibility was anticipated in our research design. Are you expressing personal concerns about conclusion protocols?" Natalie's hands fidgeted with her gold necklace. "I'm just considering all aspects of the experience for thorough documentation." "Of course." Professor Winters made a note. "We should schedule an extended session next week to discuss your specific post-study transition plan." The following days brought intensified self-examination. Natalie found herself lingering longer before the mirror each morning, appreciating how the light caught her blonde hair, how her features had softened, how completely she'd embodied this identity. Her wardrobe, once viewed as research constraints, now represented comfortable familiarity, the charcoal gray suits for authority, the emerald skirts for confidence, the modest heels that grounded her presence. Journal entries became more personal, less clinical. Day 75. Encountered the bizarre realization today that I can barely remember what it felt like to live as Lucian. When I try to imagine returning to male presentation, I experience actual anxiety. Is this standard participant response or something unique to my experience? The emerald skirt and cream blouse I wore today feel more authentic than any clothing I owned before. The research literature discusses gender euphoria. Is that what I'm experiencing? Need to maintain scientific objectivity, but finding it increasingly difficult to separate observer from observed. During her extended session with Professor Winters, Natalie finally articulated the conflict. "I'm concerned about the study conclusion," she admitted, seated in her usual position, ankles crossed beneath her charcoal gray skirt. "I've adapted more completely than anticipated. Can you elaborate?" Professor Winters kept her tone neutral, professional. "Living as Natalie no longer feels like participation in research. It feels correct." She gestured to her appearance, the carefully styled blonde hair, the professional attire, the subtle makeup. "The prospect of reverting to Lucian creates significant distress." Professor Winters nodded slowly. "You're not the first participant in gender studies to discover unexpected aspects of identity through research immersion. Our protocols include provisions for participants who experience identity realignments. What does that mean practically?
It means we prioritize participant well-being over rigid research conclusions. If continuing to live as Natalie after the formal study represents your authentic identity choice, we provide transition counseling rather than insisting on reversal.
The conversation continued for hours, exploring implications, options, and support systems. By the end, Natalie had a clearer understanding of both the path forward and the complex journey that had led to this point. The final week of the official study arrived with a mixture of conclusion activities and transition planning. Participants gathered for group discussions, final assessments, and exit interviews. While some discussed their eagerness to return to male presentation, Natalie remained quiet, conscious of her different trajectory. On the final official day, Professor Winters met with each participant individually. When Natalie's turn came, she entered the office wearing her favorite outfit, the emerald green midi skirt, cream blouse, modest heels, and the gold necklace that had become her signature accessory. Today marks the formal conclusion of your participation in the Cross-Gender Living Experience study, Professor Winters began, reviewing documentation. Your contributions have been invaluable to our research on gender expression and lived experience. Thank you for the opportunity, Natalie replied, her voice steady in its now natural higher register. Based on our previous discussions and your expressed identity preferences, we've prepared individualized transition support rather than reversion protocols. Professor Winters slid a folder across the desk. These resources include counseling options, legal information for permanent identity documentation, and continued university support services. Natalie accepted the folder, momentarily overwhelmed by the formal acknowledgement of her choice. What happens now?
Officially, the research phase concludes today. Your housing accommodation extends through the semester. The wardrobe and resources provided remain yours. Most importantly, your identity as Natalie receives full recognition and support moving forward.
Later that afternoon, Natalie returned to her apartment, no longer a research space, but simply her home. She placed the resource folder on her desk, then moved to the closet where her clothes hung in organized sections. The charcoal gray suits, the white and cream blouses, the emerald green skirts that had become an extension of her identity. Her fingers trailed along the fabrics, no longer viewing them as study parameters, but as expressions of herself. The transformation that had begun as an academic opportunity had revealed something profound, not a performance to be maintained, but an authenticity to be embraced. Natalie stood before the mirror, studying her reflection. The blonde hair framed a face that now looked natural, familiar. The gold necklace caught the light. The emerald skirt moved gently with her breathing. "Hello, Natalie," she whispered, and for the first time since the study began, the name belonged completely to her, not as research protocol, but as identity, discovered rather than assigned. The next morning, she dressed with familiar ease, emerald skirt, white blouse, modest heels, and opened her apartment door to a world that knew her only as Natalie. The academic experiment had concluded, but her authentic life was just beginning. On campus, the sociology department had posted a new bulletin on the board. Research assistance needed, gender expression and authentic identity study. Natalie paused, smiling at the familiar university letterhead, then continued toward her graduate classes, the rhythmic click of her heels on marble floors marking each confident step forward. 6 months later, Natalie sat across from Professor Winters, reviewing data from the study that had transformed her life. Now employed as a graduate research assistant, she provided unique perspective on the findings. Your case study has become central to our understanding of gender identity exploration, Professor Winters explained, sliding a manuscript across the desk. With your permission,
We'd like to include your journey in the published research.
Natalie, dressed in her signature emerald skirt and cream blouse, her blonde hair now grown slightly longer, nodded. Of course, if my experience helps advance understanding, I'm happy to contribute. There's something else, Professor Winters added. The university has approved funding for an expanded longitudinal study. We'd like you to join the research team, not as a subject, but as a coordinator for future participants who discover their authentic identity through similar processes. Natalie's hand went to the gold necklace at her throat, a gesture that had once been consciously practiced, but now came naturally.
I'd be honored. No one understands this journey better than someone who's lived it.
As she left the meeting, walking confidently across campus in her modest heels, Natalie reflected on the bulletin board notice that had caught her attention nearly a year ago. What had begun as an ambitious student's attempt to bolster graduate school applications had instead revealed a truth far more valuable than any academic credential. The experiment had concluded, but Natalie Porter continued, authentic, complete, and ready to help others discover their own truth behind the protocols and parameters of identity.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!